Hi, I'm Angela Kirin from Angela Kirin Media, and I'm here in the Brisbane State Library today to sit down and have a chat with Tim Ferguson. Tim is the former comedian from the Doug Anthony All-Stars. He's an author and is now teaching comedy masterclasses for people who want to learn how to perform comedy, stand-up comedy. These are some of his books that he's written: Carry a Big Stick and The Cheeky Monkey, that actually teaches you how to perform comedy. It's good to see you.
Thanks for having me in.
And thanks for writing The Cheeky Monkey, which is Tim's book about writing comedy. So, Tim, just quickly, how hard is it to teach comedy?
Teaching comedy is a lot simpler than you think, Angela, because comedy at its core is very simple. The things I try to get across to people are things that everybody knows, they just haven't stopped to think about them for 5 seconds. So it's very rare when I teach anywhere around the world that anybody puts a hand up to ask anything apart from, could you say that again, but could you say it in proper English?
So it is and isn't a fine art.
Oh, definitely it's more of a craft. An art is kind of a different thing. An art is where you can have various different schools operating from the same principle, whereas a craft is more like pottery. There's only so much you can do with a pot, where there is anything you can do with an artwork. You can use multimedia, you can even say it's urinal, but because I say it's art, it is. Whereas comedy is more like, making pots. It's a limited craft, and that's what makes it easy to teach.
So that's really interesting. And you've got a long history in the industry, going back to the 90s. I think I was very, very young when the Doug Anthony All-Stars came out on the television. And tell us about how that experience was, getting into TV and becoming who you are today.
Oh man, we were just buskers, and it was Richard Feidler's idea to go to Edinburgh, and we thought, well, why not, we were young and stupid and cocky. We gave it a go, and people who were running the venues there had given us a room at the end of the festival, but they changed their minds. They said, look, this is pretty good, and the things opened up at lunchtimes, so why don't you do that? So we were playing to tiny audiences of 5 people who we dragged in. Things took off from there because word spread. The act it may not have been great, but the Doug Anthony All-Stars were not like anyone else on the fringe. So you might have said, look, it's not funny and it's not at all pleasant, but it's not like anything else. You've got to see it. The first thing that happened really over there was that we didn't really know what we were doing, or we didn't really have any idea what the effect was. We'd never really done much TV apart from little bits, but all of a sudden, when you got an audience of millions, suddenly everything changes overnight. And we were only still young and stupid in our very early 20s. So it was a bit of a rush, but after the initial rush, you're in the bubble, so you just have to make it work.
I'm particularly impressed by how you 3 harmonise together with your vocals and the choreography of the act. So how did you learn how to do all that?
I just had a good harmony teacher at school, a lady called Margaret at Free School Without Walls, who just had a really good system of getting it into our heads. It just made it handy on the street where, we could busk and get things wrong, and the other guys picked up harmonies, and it's just trial and error really, see what works. And if you can count to 8 and also count to 13, you can do harmonies, no problem.
It's mathematical.
Yeah, it's just mathematics.
In your book here, which talks about your life, Carry a Big Stick by Tim Ferguson, you talk about, I think a beautiful adjective for you is fearless, because I think you are, that's my personal opinion, because you hold 2-day master workshops and you do it with multiple sclerosis. So how do you find the stamina for that?
Oh, it's just stubbornness. In fact, that sounds funny, but really it's just about being stubborn.
Yeah.
I think it's so important for people to understand how comedy works, because comedy is a big employer for writers or creatives or producers who can reliably make stuff that's funny. The door is wide open because it's what the audience wants.
Yeah.
The audience doesn't really want what most of my university students will be turning out outside of comedy class, which in a polite word is depressing shit. Which is just, and I understand they're rattling the cages because, you know, they've woken up, they're 19 years old, they're 20 years old, and they want to fix, you know, some imbalance in the world. But what happens is, what they make is a short film, typically, that doesn't have any humour at all, which means it's just a little kind of youthful tantrum that no one's ever going to pay money to go see. Whereas with comedy, if you say, hey, we're the comic film in a university student short film night, everybody sits up, they're paying attention. And even if it's not funny, you've got their attention. Whereas here's another dark, depressing story about what a student thinks you need to know, despite the fact you already know it.
So it makes sense to teach it, doesn't it?
Oh yes, somebody's got to. In Australia, there's only one other full-time teacher of narrative comedy, which is, you know, comedy stories and characters, and that's Andrea Powell at RMIT University. But there's no other university that covers comedy with any, was certainly not on the curriculum. The teachers may cover it, maybe play a funny movie and say, you know, this is how it works. But it's not on the curriculum because universities and the teachers at universities, you may have heard the expression ignorant shitheads. And I say that knowing full well that what I'm saying is factually true. If they do not understand how half of drama works, the crying mask and the laughing mask, they do not understand the whole thing, which is why they allow students to make these depressing films, because those lecturers do not know any better. If you don't understand the principles of comedy, and there are only 3 of them, if you cannot name them when you're watching this, you should not be teaching young people how to write. And I would recommend to anybody who's thinking of doing a writing course to first ask, do you explain how both masks work? And when they say no, which they will, you just move on and, you know, get in touch with me, and I'll put you in touch with Andrea Powell at RMIT. And that way you'll have a career, you get a beach house because you get the audience.
Yeah. So just to finish up, Tim, tell us about the Cheeky Monkey.
Oh yeah, The Cheeky Monkey is a book that tells you how to write narrative comedy. It's got all the ancient principles that I've ripped off. Like I've ripped off Aristotle, who was the first one to write about a comic story. I've ripped off all the people that I've worked with who are the producers and writers, sitting around and hearing, you know, how people who are much better than me explain what they do. I ripped it all off and I put it in a book that's written in a way so that pretty well anybody should be able to pick it up, and before they know it, have a working knowledge of how comedy works. Things like the punchline goes at the end. And when you hear it and you know it, you go, oh, I knew that. But it's full of things that you already know in your heart, but you need to know in your head if you're going to get a beach house from writing.
Yes. So you've heard it all here from Tim Ferguson himself, and go out and get The Cheeky Monkey.
And do everything Angela says.
Yeah, I'm the boss.
Brandon, we better get a photo together. While the lighting's good. Okay.
interested in what you do. Can you tell us about structure, more about structure as
Oh,
well?
great.
I
I'm
know
doing
that's
3 acts.
probably a bit more dry, but you know, I think.
Oh, bugger 'em, they've just had lunch. They can deal with it. And you've been doing the course, like it's not that hard. I mean, you should be able to understand everything I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, there's no point where you go, well, now I'm completely in the weeds, because it's so dumb ass simple. It's wide open. It doesn't tell you exactly what to do. It just says, if you do this, it works.
Yeah, yeah.